Hey guys, it's rainy. I'm in my car getting ready for work. So I posted a tweet a few days ago responding to a trend that I was noticing in books, which is not really the subject of this video. I just kind of wanted to give you some background. And I commented basically that there was this trend in books that I found unsettling. I was really surprised that in 2019, this was kind of the tone of things and whatever. But several of the replies that I got, I felt warranted a video. So I had a couple of people tweet explicitly, and then I had some back channel conversation to the effect of, well, if you see this trend and it bothers you, why do you read these books? And it made me think about a conversation that I have with my working partner all the time. For those of you who aren't familiar with how traditional Wiccan groups run, they're usually run by two people. For Gardnerians, ideally that's a high priestess and a high priest, although there's flexibility there, right? And there's certainly a lot of variety there, whether or not we think there's flexibility there. Anyway, so I run Foxfire with a partner. Anyway, he is very, very smart, very bookish. He's way smarter than me, guys. And I know it kind of bewilders him sometimes too, that I read what I do, because I read everything. You've seen my book collection, you've seen me on Instagram, I run my mouth about books, and I try to read everything. I love beginner books. I love the pretty hardcovers, and I love academic books. I love really weighty, complicated books. I love books from different traditions. I want all of it, and I want to spend time with all of it. But at the same time, that doesn't mean that I agree with everything I read, or that I don't feel compelled to sometimes speak out against some of the things that I read. Etc. It's all part of this thing that I love. But my partner finds it, again, kind of bewildering because time is finite. We're busy. I work a full-time job. I have obligations as an author. I have a family. Everybody's time is limited. And it seems like nobody has the time to do the things that matter all the time. We always have to prioritize. And so given that, why do I spend time reading books that are going to maybe not fuel my personal path directly, or they're going to irritate me, or they're going to be shallow? Why do I spend my time doing those things when I could be dedicating it to things that might be more worthwhile? And kind of the responses that I got on Twitter were things to the effect of well, if it bothers you, then why not read things that you agree with? Why even waste your energy? And people weren't saying this dismissively, they were real questions as far as I could tell. At least, even if they weren't, they still warrant an answer. So I wanted to talk about why I read bad books, if in fact they're bad. A few reasons. First, give me a second, right? If I were better at videos, I would edit moments like that out, but I think they're important, right? Pause and think. So, whether or not we read them, books impact our community. A good example is think about folks she's not a person, right? But Lisa Chamberlain, okay, who I'm pretty sure is a cabal of ghostwriters. So you get on Amazon, and Lisa Chamberlain books are everywhere. And one of the reasons they're everywhere, and this is not a critique of Lisa Chamberlain necessarily, it's just a reality. If you get on Amazon, Lisa Chamberlain books are everywhere. And one of the reasons they're everywhere is because they cost practically nothing. You can get the electronic versions. I think they're less than $1 most of the time. The paperbacks are inexpensive, and they are consistently in best-selling slots on Amazon, okay, which means that they're everywhere. People are buying and consuming those books, and whether or not I read them, they are influencing the people who are going to be at least passing through our communities. They may not stay, but people who pass through have impact. Other good examples, we complain a lot that we collectively, I do it too, we complain that people don't necessarily read very much. They go to YouTube or they get on Instagram, they're watching witch influencers. Another good example is Harmony Nice. Again, I'm not picking on Harmony Nice. It has nothing to do with content. It's just a reality that Harmony has a huge following, which means that regardless of whether or not I individually or you individually watch her videos or read her now book, she has an impact. And as a coven leader, as an author, as somebody who is active in public communities, I feel like it is important for me to be able to speak the same languages as the people that I will be interacting with. I think about it in the same way as when I was a high school teacher, and I don't mean this in terms of like a power differential. Obviously, there's a power differential at play between a teacher and students. But as a high school teacher, I read a lot of YA. I mean, I read a lot of YA anyway, but I went out of my way to expose myself to the things that I know that my kids loved, because it gave us a common language, a way for me to relate to them, and a way for them to kind of humanize me. And I'm using a lot of the same strategies when I am consuming these other kinds of media that some other witches and pagans and Wiccans find questionable. It's not about whether or not I love them personally or they change my path, but they impact all of us. If you don't know it's there, or you don't know what trends are going around, that doesn't mean that they don't impact you. So it's important to me that I know what's going on. Going to Barnes & Noble or flipping through the Amazon top sellers charts is a little bit like turning on the news in our community, because regardless of what's trending on Pathos or what's trending on the Wild Hunt or whatever like our big news kind of sources are, you can use what is selling and what people are consuming as a kind of litmus test for what is going on in our community in terms of the ideas that are circulating. And that's why I try to read everything. I try to consume as much as possible, one way or the other, about all kinds of witches, because it impacts directly my meat-based communities. So that, first and foremost, is why I read bad books. The second thing is that this is actually like one of my favorite things about myself. I live in a state of wanting to be surprised. I think it's probably just human nature or something to kind of write things off. Like our brains are hardwired to make automatic judgments because like evolutionarily they keep us safe or whatever. I don't know. I'm not a neuroscientist. But like we make judgments. We do judge a book by its cover, which we should, because people spend a lot of time and money to make books so that you will judge them by their covers and buy them. Okay. But I like to create the space to be surprised by books, because just because it's a popular writer who people are suspicious of, or just because it's put out on a press that has historically put out things that are questionable, or just because the target audience is teenage girls, or just because whatever, that doesn't mean that there aren't nuggets of awesome buried in those things. Just because a book is marketed a particular way doesn't mean that that's what it is. And that's not to say that, it isn't true most of the time, okay? I don't know. I wouldn't say that I'm disappointed just because after, 20 years of doing this, you kind of have to get over the feeling of being disappointed. Otherwise, you'd just be disappointed all the time. But I am so pleased and gratified when I find good bits nestled in these books that I would have ignored if I had just sort of done what other people do, which is write them off. I don't know. Like, I also find it exciting. Like, it is interesting to me to see what other people are doing. Because here's the other thing, and I'm not sure that other people do this. When I read a book about witchcraft, it's not because I think the book is necessarily going to teach me anything about witchcraft and my practice of witchcraft. When I read a book, especially a beginner book, it's because I want to get inside the brain of the person writing it. Okay, like, I don't read, you know, like some of these Instagram hardbacks, you know, I'm not reading them because I think they're going to like say something about the Wiccan read that I'm never going to have heard before, okay? I know it's going to be a lot of regurgitation, but I'm interested in the way it is regurgitated because it gives me insight into the person producing it, and it gives me insight into the culture, kind of like the force that is marketing these ideas. Like, it says something about us. Like, I think of reading as sort of like doing anthropology. So it's just like with my high schoolers when I had them, learning about what they're consuming, what they're reading, what they're watching, what they're valuing is a way of learning about them. It's not because I think that I'm going to like pick up some new tricks as a witch. If I do, that's great. That's gravy. But that's not why I'm there. So it's really difficult for me to be disappointed by books. I've been recently kind of disturbed by some books. The tweet that I mentioned at the beginning was particularly about how, like, there are a lot of books that are circulating right now, like memoir style, kind of like reclaim your power witch books, which might be well and good, but I'm seeing a lot of gender essentialism in a way that surprises me in 2019. Given the culture that we're working so hard to build, you know, like, I'm startled to see books coming out now that emphasize that the witch is, you know, always a menstruating woman or something, for example. Like, just really startling things. In an earlier decade, it wouldn't have been striking. But anyway, like, but that's not to say that I think that these books shouldn't exist. I think that the literature that is produced reflects trends in the movement. So that, my friends, is why I read bad books. Now, that said, there's lots of ways to kind of, you know, consume these things without necessarily shoveling money at people who you don't agree with, or, you know, supporting publishing houses that you find questionable or whatever. You know, I obviously have the resources, you know, like with a full-time job and no kids and kind of the choices I've made in my life. Like, I've very consciously built a life in which I can have a lot of books. But, you know, libraries are still a thing. There are lots of ways to acquire books. I'm learning about places online where you can rent PDFs too. Like, that's a thing, like online libraries. I don't really know how that works, but I've been kind of reading about them. You know, interlibrary loan is a thing. And then places like Thrift Books and some of these places where you can buy the book, but you're buying it secondhand. You're not supporting the author or the publishing house when you do that, and they're usually really inexpensive. So, like, I'm not advocating, like, going out and buying everything, but if you have the opportunity to read, then, like, I think it's worthwhile to read as much as you can. And these are the particular choices I've made. I find that it makes me more compassionate towards other kinds of practitioners. So that's why I do it. Anyway, I hope you're well. I will be posting some more book reviews up on Instagram If you're one of my patrons on Patreon, I'll probably be posting more extensive book reviews. Anyway, I hope you guys are well. Enjoy the rising sun. I'm about to go into work now. Okay, bye.